Georgia broke draft records a couple of years ago, having the 15 guys drafted, 5 in the first round, right? These things just don't happen. Followed up in 2023 with 10 more players drafted. So 25 over the between the 22 and the 2023 drafts, including a lot of first round picks and a number one overall pick in Trayvon Walker there at the beginning. Say what you will about that, but he was the first overall pick in hindsight. Maybe it should have been Aiden Hutchinson, but Trayvon's still a freak. 2024, Georgia can do even better than they did in 2023 when they had 10, right? Georgia could have, by my count, it could end up with 12 players drafted, right? And that would be in between 23 and 22, and that'd be impressive. Will all of these guys get picked? I don't know. I like just sitting here looking at my list, players. Like, I'm not going to say the names yet, but looking at my list, players that I think for sure will get drafted for Georgia. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? I think at least 8 or 9 of these 12 names that I have written down will get drafted. So at the very minimum, Georgia's going to add to these numbers, but adding another 12, man, I mean, that would be impressive. To go on a 3-year run where you put out 15, 10, and 12 guys just in the NFL draft. That doesn't count the guys that went undrafted and are making rosters. Do the math. What would that be? 37 in 3 years? That'd be a pretty special number. That would be an average of 12 and change a year for Georgia, right? So pretty special numbers. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post here talking about the NFL draft, talking about the Georgia Bulldogs that I think are going to get drafted. Will they reach this 12 number? We'll talk a little bit about each guy. Maybe I should pull up some numbers too to help out with this, just for some more perspective about what they contributed to the team this past season. But having 12 would be great. Let's get into it. Brock Bowers is going to be a first round pick, right? I don't think that's a secret. He could be a top 10 pick, right? Mel Kiper has got him at his number 7 prospect. I've seen Bowers mocked anywhere from 4 to 17. That's kind of the range I've seen for Brock Bowers. Personally, right, and I love studying the draft, and you guys, I feel like you guys know at this point I really care about it, and I care about the bridge between college and the NFL. Personally, I think Bowers will end up going somewhere between 5 and 15, 5 to 12 range. I just kind of have a hard time seeing a player so talented fall behind that. You don't see huge falls very often, right? It's just not something that happens super often. I think Derwin James is one that I can recently think of where I was like, wow, why is that guy dropping this far? Don't think that's going to happen with Bowers, especially with what he showed this past season with his injury, right? How fast he can recover from that and make an impact. I actually think it only helped his draft stock. In a weird way, I think getting hurt actually probably helped him in a way. A guy that doesn't need his draft stock to be helped out, and maybe a guy that we shouldn't really be discussing that much. Let's move on. Other possible first rounders. There are 3, right? There are 3 or 4 guys other than Brock that have a chance. Amarius Mims, tackle. Can't get enough of a cornerstone tackle. You need those guys. You need 6, 7 guys like Amarius Mims. Freaks. He's more of a potential pick than a production pick for the NFL, right? Obviously, only 1 full year as a starter, and not even 1 full year as a starter because he got hurt with a tightrope ankle surgery. So there's really not that much tape on Amarius Mims. And I think that will hurt his draft stock. If Mims was able to stay healthy this year, and that didn't happen, I do believe that he would have been a more cemented first-round pick. But as around the 4th or 5th best tackle in this class, according to many people, from a potential standpoint, he probably would be like the 2nd best tackle in this draft. I think that he's probably a later first-round pick. No longer is he. I don't think he's a contender for a top 10 pick the way he was before. And I don't know if we'll see some meteoric rise from him. I do think he's going to test really, really well, and it's going to help him. I think that'll secure him as a first-round pick, his testing. I just don't think he'll be a top-end pick the way he could have been if he didn't stay healthy. I saw on a mock that Ladd McConkey is like a borderline first round pick to them. I don't think Ladd McConkey will end up being a first round pick. I think he's more of a second, third, fourth round pick in this NFL, and it's going to be the medicals that hold him back the furthest, right? In my opinion, I don't know what his medical situation is, but it would be my opinion that would be what holds him back more than anything. And here's the other reason. Here's the other reason why I don't think Ladd McConkey will be a first round pick, right? Depending on who you ask, he's kind of ranked anywhere between like the 6th at the highest to like the 12th, 13th best receiver in this draft. You're getting drafted. You're getting drafted, and you're going to be at least you're going to probably be at least a third round pick, Ladd McConkey. But here are the first round guys at receiver. Ohio State's Marvin Harrison Jr. will be a top 5 pick. I think Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors will end up being top 10 picks. Keon Coleman, I don't see it as much with Keon Coleman, but he is getting tabbed as a first round guy. So that's 4 guys probably going to go ahead. The other guy for LSU, Brian Thomas, I think he'll likely get drafted ahead. I think that A.D. Mitchell will likely get drafted ahead of Ladd McConkey. I think Xavier Worthy will likely get drafted. So we're talking about 70 guys. Emeka Egbuka, another slot receiver. Some people might prefer him to Ladd McConkey, right? Xavier Legette from South Carolina. Those are the names, right? Names that maybe will go ahead of Ladd McConkey. That'll be what stops him from being a first-round pick, because that many receivers in the first round would be kind of a lot. It would be a lot, right? You get some really good drafts where there's 5 or 6 receivers taken in the first round, all right? I would cap it off around then, around that 6 mark. That would be just a lot of receivers in round 1. So that was the Ladd McConkey conversation. Mel Kiper does not have, and I'm just looking at his rankings, obviously, is for rankings, right? And I don't just base my stuff off of one guy's rankings, and I have my own in my head. I don't have it all written out yet, but he doesn't have Kendall Milton or Daijun Edwards in his top 10 running backs, right? He's got Jonathan Brooks, guys like Trey Benson, Audric Estime, Travion Henderson, Blake Corum. We kind of know those guys from Texas and Florida State. Those players have all kind of been NFL running backs this whole time. Kendall Milton proved that he is an NFL running back at the back half of this year, and he fought hard. He fought hard to stay healthy. He fought hard to stay healthy and get out there and be out there this season. But the production, the 100-yard games, the Orange Bowl, which game was it where he was just, the Ole Miss game, where he was just running all over people? I mean, Kendall Milton proved at the back end of the year that he is an NFL running back. I do think Kendall Milton would get drafted. So at this point, I've named 4 players that I think will get drafted for Georgia. I think you'll see Daijun Edwards at the very end of the draft, right? Probably like a 6 or 7 round guy. Doesn't have the size or the speed that you really want out of a 3-down back, and he won't be a 3-down back in the NFL. He wasn't really one at Georgia for the most part. A guy with heart, a guy that doesn't say a lot. I could see him really, really slipping out of this thing. Maybe Daijun Edwards goes undrafted, but I kind of see him as a late-round pick. It was a travesty to me that Kenny McIntosh was drafted as late as he was in the 7th round last year. That might be an indicator. Maybe Daijun Edwards won't get drafted, right? The running back is a changing position. So Daijun Edwards, I'm on the fence about a little bit as far as if he'll get picked up, but I do think he will in the later rounds. Cedric Van Pram, harder with centers, but if he goes past round 3, I'd be pretty shocked, right? He's the top center in this draft, or the second center in this draft. If he's not the top, he started for a very long time. Experience matters a lot in the NFL. He was obviously very good. A guy that Georgia, he was a captain for a long time. He was at SEC Media Days as a sophomore, right? So he's a guy that Georgia really trusted, and he was huge. His return to Georgia this past season was a big, big deal. He will get drafted. So that's 5 for sure. Maybe on Edwards. I think Marcus Owens-Jackson will get drafted. And you want to know why? The NFL needs receivers, right? With the way football is right now, the NFL always is going to need receivers. He's got sure hands. He can go up and get it. He's not going to be a top-end pick, right? He might not be in the first 3 or 4 rounds, but I do think Marcus Owens-Jackson will get drafted. Defense. So that's 6 offensive players for sure. I think he'll get drafted maybe with Edwards, in my opinion. Defense. Kamari Lassiter will get drafted. Kamari Lassiter might be a first-round pick, right? He's viewed as like the corners in this draft that I think are probably better than Kamari Lassiter. Terrion Arnold from Alabama, who I think might be better than Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's going to end up being probably a first-round pick as well. Those guys are ranked ahead of him. I don't know that it's super far, but I get it, and I get it from an athletic standpoint. I don't know if Kamari's as gifted as an athlete. He's locked down. Cooper DeJean, the guy from Iowa, the white guy from Iowa, right? He's projected to be a first-rounder. Corners that might go over Kamari. So back end of the first round or the second round for Kamari Lassiter, in my opinion. Bullard, I think, as a second or third round guy, I'm not seeing him in these first rounds. A guy that I thought was going to play his way into being a first round pick this year, and it just feels like the traction hasn't been there. Is it from the physicality standpoint? Is he maybe a little smaller? I mean, the dude's an impact safety, so I think he'll for sure get drafted. I would be shocked if it's past round 3. So 2 defensive players for sure. I think Tyke Smith as well, the other secondary, the other safety. He's productive and he's around the ball a lot, guys. Tyke Smith has some flaws as a player. All these players have flaws. Tyke Smith is not a very fast safety or nickel DB, whatever you want to call him, whatever they're going to put him in at the NFL position. Tyke Smith is not as physically gifted as some of the other guys, especially when you look at the safety spot, but definitely one of the 10 best safeties in this class, a guy that will get drafted. Would be shocked if he wasn't. So 3 for sure. The 2 on defense. So there's 3 out of the 9 guys that I'm talking about here, or 3 out of the 12 guys that I'm talking about here that I'm not sure will get drafted. I'm not 100% sure. Zion Logan, Tremont Wathauer are the 2 on the defensive line, the 2 defensive guys that I'm not sure about. I think Logue probably will. When you just think about a guy that's his size, he's probably going to test well in the way, and I think that's going to be good for him. But the problem with these 2, when you talk about Zion Logue, you talk about Tremont Wathauer, is just a lack of production is probably the best way to put it. Zion Logue, 9 tackles this year. 8 of them were assists. You know what? I read that improperly. 17 tackles. Right? So, look, you don't know that your defensive lineman is supposed to go get 50 tackles, but there's not a lot of production from Zion Logue there. Only a half a sack. You kind of look at that and you're like, Tremont Wathauer, only 11. He has the 1 sack, right? So there's just not a lot of production. And Tremont Wathauer was literally invisible. Do you know how many Georgia fans I've asked if they know who Tremont Wathauer is and they don't? He's out there all the time for 3 years. I almost feel bad for the guy. No one knows who you are, bro. I felt bad. But Tremont Wathauer, a guy, neither of those guys productive, and I think at the end of the day, that might be what hold them back from being drafted. So for sure, I think 9 will get drafted. Out of those 12 I named, maybe those 3 more. So Georgia does have a chance to beat what it did in 2023. Those are some quick hitting reactions about Georgia's players' draft stocks. Went a little bit overtime, but thanks for watching.